The Articulate Coven is the original, unofficial podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice's Immortal universe from AMC and AMC+. Welcome to the Articulate Coven. We are your hosts. I'm Joel.
I'm Ashley.
And we are the Articulate Coven. And we're back. I mean,
we're
we
back.
Anywhere. We just did an episode, but now
We've been
this
here.
is like real ones.
Yes. Oh my God. And oh my God. I'm so excited to talk about this. I have to say, just like initial feeling, I was completely enraptured the entire time. I could not take my eyes away from the TV. My husband and I both were so into it. Brett was like, we finished watching it and he was like, holy shit, I'm really glad this was so good, because I was really hoping that the first season wasn't just like a flash in the pan thing.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Actually, here's the mood for me. I literally, just as I'm waiting to get on with you, and I open up my Facebook app and I look at the Facebook group. Brother Kyle, who has been a longtime member, posted the group just a few minutes ago. I've been so out of touch with social media lately. I'm about to watch season 2, episode 1. Please tell me you guys are still doing a podcast.
We're still here.
Not only are we still here, we've done like a whole season for you, Brother Kyle. You should go
right.
back. There's a back catalog for you now. But that's a perfect reminder to me. Like, sometimes I feel like, oh, you spam people in your life, right? Like, you tell them, you say too often, oh, I'm doing this podcasting thing. Oh, hey, we're talking about Anne Rice, whatever. Like, don't post those reels on your own Facebook. Just put them in the group of people who have self-selected. It's so funny, 2 things in a row. So that post from Brother Kyle, but also I'm in the living room and my 14-year-old son, I said something about, all right, man, I'm about to go record, good night, everybody. And he goes, what are you recording? And I'm like, my podcast. And he goes, what podcast? I'm like, what?
Where have you been?
Me earlier tonight, you told me, hey, that vampire show you like, Interview with the Vampire, is back on AMC. Did you know that? And I said, yes, I do a podcast about it. Of course I am aware what date it launched, but thanks for reminding me. None of the other family mentioned it. Where did you see the ad? And we had a little discussion about it. Remember, bud? And he goes, well, yeah, but I didn't know you were doing that podcast.
I'm glad he's keeping you humble.
Okay.
It's really
exactly.
good.
So he's not paying any attention. And even like Brother Kyle is theoretically at least selected into our stuff, probably follows us somewhere in a podcast app or something, and still didn't know necessarily what we're doing. So always remind everybody, here's what we're doing.
That's right.
We're a fan podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles and the Lives of the Mayfair Witches, the books themselves, the previous movie adaptations, and of course, the Immortal universe from AMC and AMC Plus, where they're adapting those series and theoretically others in the future. AMC owns the rights to like 18 of Anne Rice's books, and they have promised to adapt, and they're going to have crossovers and connections and ongoing excitement as we go. We are in love with this Interview with the Vampire series. We are less in love with the Mayfair series.
It's true.
But we are big fans of Anne since childhood, and because of that, all of these characters in these worlds mean a lot to us. So if any of that subscribes to you, then you're in the right place. Follow us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us on YouTube. And like Brother Kyle, catch up on the back catalog if you're new here. So tonight we're going to be talking about episode 1 from season 2. What really would the damned have to say to the damned? All right. Ashley, big thoughts first of all. Did it meet your expectations? Are you happy after 1 episode on the trajectory of season 2?
Holy shit. Yes. Yes, and yes, and yes. And I will say it kind of rolled out the way I sort of expected it to. Pretty much the way that you sort of called it from like a while back, that we would get this like war-torn like time in Europe and with, out in Eastern Europe with our really sad sack vampires that are not sad sack like Louis, but just sad sacks of flesh. And it really, really shook out brilliantly for me. I love Delaney. I think that she came out like fucking guns blazing in this episode. She Yeah, I won't get too in depth yet, but yes, I was super excited for it. We got a little Lestat. We knew we weren't going to get much, but we got a little, and what we got was very enticing and interesting, and made me excited for what's next. How about you?
The number one thing that I took away or was thinking as I wrapped up my first watch, and I watched it again the second time with my wife today, but when I watched it that first time, I kept thinking, and more as the episode went on, so much of what we've seen so far in the trailers, and we thought we'd seen a lot. You and I both talked about, I don't want to watch any more trailers. I feel like,
right,
I want to save some things. So much of what we had been shown was just from this one episode.
Was just from this one fucking episode, right?
It's just an insane amount that they have not given anything away, honestly.
What
so
a tease, right?
So that was the first thing. And then the second thing is there were a handful of moments early that I was very excited about because it shows me that the quality of this production has not gone down. There hasn't been really the time and the audience alignment to justify enlarged expenses. I mean, I'm sure the budget went up because that's what budgets do, but I'm guessing it didn't go up much. If this is the success that I expected to be this season, I think from 2 to 3, we are going to see that budget increase on screen and in the production. That's not to say that this is cheap. I'm just saying this is consistent. They also didn't cut the budget. This is consistent with what we saw in season 1. Let me say one negative thing up front, though, because I want to get your take on it and see if you noticed it as well. The first season, even in our rewatch, the first season seemed to me very much to have been edited for streaming, as in the act breaks are there, but they're story breaks and they're not hard cuts in a way that makes you go, oh, and that's where I'd put a commercial.
Right.
It flowed very much like it had been edited for AMC Plus, and then they happened to squeeze the ad breaks into the act breaks. Makes perfect sense. You write to, like a 3-act script or whatever anyway. But this season, or at least this episode, has very different hard fade to black for 2 or 3 frames. It felt like several times in the episode, and it felt to me that the script was written in more of a network television presentation way as well. The one moment that I want to call out on that is one that I enjoyed. It just felt very much, okay, and now we go to commercial. He'll say this, and then he'll go to commercial. Ha ha ha! And in the room, it felt like that was a great idea, and that makes me wonder if literally they're not writing the scripts to the network breaks now as in a way that they didn't previously. The moment when Daniel and Armand are having a little tete-a-tete at the table, and Armand finishes the conversation by saying disregard and then kind of stomps off.
Right.
And it goes to black as
it's like a hard cut.
Disregard, and then it goes to black, like a hard cut to black. And it just, I was telling Kelly, it felt cheaper to me,
like a little
it's
jarring.
On TV. What's really strange, Ashley, is it reminded me. I'm currently rewatching Dallas, the original, soap opera Dallas from CBS a million years ago, and that when they would go to commercial at the end of an act break, they'd literally do it with the orchestra and da 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 da. And then cut to commercial as everybody froze their face on the dramatic thing that had just happened, Okay, so Interview with the Vampire is not doing that. But did anyone else notice? Did you notice these hard cuts where they would go to commercial if you were watching it on TV?
So that one didn't bother me quite as much because it just felt like a hard transition. But I totally clocked that towards the end of the episode. There was a really, really hard shift. And it felt really, really jarring to me. I completely clocked that, but in a totally different part of the episode. But yeah, I can totally see that being an actual thing that they're doing. Well, I mean, they weren't sure, and I guess if they're going to push it, network, that's where allegedly they make all the money. So, well, I understand if they're shifting gears as far as what they're gearing it towards, but still.
Yes. And this one, if they're trying harder to bite into that Walking Dead audience and, pull away some late 50s and 60-year-old folks from the AMC network. I'm good. That'll be good for the show in the long run, probably. So, and I mean, it's not like those people don't read either. A lot of those are Anne Rice fans too. They don't know where. Well, my aunt's a huge Anne Rice fan. I've given her access to this through the app. I still don't think she's watched season 1 other than the first episode, which I sat down
which you made her watch.
Right. Because AMC on the streaming thing is kind of a hassle. She's like, I'm not sure where it is, and I don't know how to get to it. And I think there's a part of her who's like terrified of buying it, right? Like
right. On
accidentally
accident.
spending money somewhere. Anyway.
Like the time I accidentally bought the same season of Killing Eve twice. I was like, damn it, Ashley, you were too enthusiastic.
Okay, let's start right here from the top. New cover image. I don't know why I was surprised. I mean, first of all, of course they would change the image. The skylines are going to be different. Right. We're not going to be in New Orleans probably at all this season. Like, of course we would change the skylines. But they did it, Game of Thrones style. Gave us a different image to reflect what we're going to see. And I loved I'm staring at it for a second, and I'm like, those are tanks, right? Those tanks are moving. Right. And then there's an explosion. And then the plane is flying. Yeah, and you're like, oh, it's an air raid. It's just really, really cool from the top to see, again, that kind of like, hey, this is the same thing. Don't worry about it. We're running it back. We're going to do it again.
When we very first started this journey in episode 1, that was one thing I said about like the opening, how I hoped that it was going to be like, kind of end up being like a Game of Thrones things where there's little like hints and pictures in there for us. I love that, even if in a little way we got that.
Well, it'll be interesting to me whether it changes, since we're not going to be in necessarily war
times
Europe. We're in now post-war Paris for the next few episodes at least. Theatrical call out right at the top for the cast replacement. Ashley, did this make your little theater kid heart flutter?
Totally. Oh my God. I was like, we got like
of Claudia is now played by Delaney Hales.
Yeah.
Just like you put it in the program when you have a swing come in, right?
It felt so, it did. Like I totally was delighted by that. I actually mentioned that to Brett while we were watching. I was like, holy shit. They're like, hey, look and listen, this is what's happening. It's just so you know, we're not pretending like it didn't happen as well. So I think acknowledging it is really great on a couple of different levels. But yeah, everything about this is already appealing to my theater kid soul.
It's funny you mentioned we did it. You're not imagining things,
right?
I mentioned just a minute ago Dallas. I'm in season 3 right now of the original series, and they literally just replaced both Sue Ellen's sister and Cliff Barnes' father, Digger. Just a totally different actor now in the role from when they've recently been on in season, the end of season 2 or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, it's interesting how they used to do things. But I love that call out. And also, since we're right there at the beginning, let's acknowledge, if you didn't watch it, the previously on was fantastic.
Yes,
so
it
well
was.
Put. If you really haven't thought about this show since season 1 and you watched it on TV at the time and you don't know the books, or even if you didn't see season 1, you could watch that recap and really be okay joining this thing, mid-story, which is the way that you want it to be, honestly.
Yeah.
You want a show like this to be able to grow like a snowball.
It was a high-level recap. It was really great. It was really well done. You got most of the points that you needed going into this.
Man, Louis got a great line. First of all, just in general, you're going to hear me call out the dialogue and the language in this a lot because, again, such a well-written show.
Oh, my God.
Particularly in comparison to our sister show, The Mayfairs. She wasn't going to let humanity's ideological rift delay her any longer. I love the fact that he boils down World War II to humanity's ideological rift. But it shows right there from moment 1 how Louis, in this trip across the ocean, has ideologically, mentally, emotionally removed himself from the human, how does he put it later, human concerns,
Yeah.
He has learned the lesson whether it's the right lesson or not. He's learned the lesson of his attack on the alderman and the riots that followed.
Don't mind me disassociating over here. You know, it's very much la 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 la, I don't care kind of a vibe.
Man, Claudia was a thing of a little indecision. Again, right there after this opening, I just thought that was such a succinct way to describe the character of Claudia. And some of the, we did in our Q&A episode, we mentioned the question from somebody on our YouTube channel about how could you not like Claudia? But that's one of the things that she said. She's a woman of action. She's a character of action. And that's what Louis is saying here. Claudia is a doer, which makes the arc of this episode in particular so effective, Anya, honestly. Okay. So here's an example of how everything from the trailer is from this first episode, basically. The giant explosion, which I was so convinced when we watched the Jones cut. I was like, oh, guys, we're going to see Lestat in the French Revolution. That's Lestat and Nicholas coming out of that building.
That's an air raid.
It's an air raid in World War II. That wasn't even Lestat and Nicholas. It was Louis and Claudia from episode 1.
From within the first 10 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah. Also, I love her casualty with all those things. Air raid, and then they just they hustle. Trucks, and they move again.
She looks fantastic, by the way. The costuming, I think they look so properly bedraggled, but still they can pass in society. They're not just living in the earth and coming out all dusty and shit. They actually look okay, but they're fucking busted. And she realizes that looking young serves her in this situation, and so she looks young to me. It's something that was kind of jarring after seeing how grown up and how much our Claudia in season 1 had embraced her femininity and her womanhood, whereas this is like a total kind of break push back physically, and the way she presents herself to other people, obviously not in her relationship with Louis, and the way she's driving this train down the path, Yeah.
I don't, Delaney, I don't know what it is about it. I mean, while I do know one thing, it is genuinely the accent is better.
It's better.
It's
so
better. And look, does it boil? Let's talk about this for a second, because you and I are both actually from the South. It is. It's a hard accent to get. I wouldn't say accurate, because accurate's not always what you're exactly striving for, right? Mm-mm. But you want to. No. You want to engender it in a way that is not lampooning or festooning it, right? You don't want to be Foghorn Leghorn or Colonel Sanders,
It's so easy to default to the drawl, that drawly kind of feel, and assume that's it for a Southern accent. Whereas anybody that listens to me after I've had, a few drinks in me, then I sound like, what's coming out of my mouth is cornbread. So it's just a real difference from that sophisticated kind of drawl that you hear in I'm from Savannah, as opposed to Ashley from Arkansas when I'm really in my cups.
But does it come down to the similarities between, and it's not just similarities, but it's the origins? Is it because of the connections between the Southern accent and the British accent, and the fact that these are both British actors,
British actors are always better at Southern accents than, or even Australian actors. Cate Blanchett was in, I think it was called The Gift, where she actually played a character based on Billy Bob Thornton's actual mother, who grew up and lived in where I was born. And her Arkansas Southern accent is top notch, so great. And both of us are kind of snobs about accents, but particularly about our own, whatever version of it we're listening to, we know what rings true and we know what doesn't. And both of us have spent a lot of time in South Louisiana, so we really have an idea of what that sounds like and feels like.
Well, and again, we don't get very much of Lestat in this, but we do get quite a lot of Louis. And Louis's English Southern Louisiana accent, but the tinges of French, the way that he brings in the French influence and the Creole influence into his voice on a word-to-word basis is really impressive. Anyway, I just wanted to call that out. That is better. That's not the only thing that, in my opinion, is better about this performance from Delaney. Some of it may be the writing, like this episode, and also the fact that she doesn't face off against Lestat at all in this. Maybe I'm not taking sides against my baby boy. I don't know.
Right.
But I enjoyed her thoroughly here, and she's won me over in just the 45 minutes or so. I'm down.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely on board with this casting change. I think we'll all be well served by it. I think she's gonna kill the rest of the season, obviously. If tonight is any indication.
And she's kicking ass even before she really gets to speak to us. There's a line here early where he says something to Claudia about he's cold, maybe we ought to go home, and then you go to the diary and you hear her.
Oh, she's so
angry. He asks if we can go home. Home. Can there be a more offensive question? First of all, that's good writing right there all on its own. But also, let's talk about that for a minute, Ashley. The themes in the first season of domestic violence and abusive relationships and manipulative relationships, all obviously very not subtext, they're text. This here is something that happens so often in those relationships, right?
100%.
You're the bad guy because you won't just come home. Home? Yeah. What is home?
Yeah. And I thought home was us. I thought home was us together.
Oof.
Leaving this place, and now you want to go home to him, to him.
I didn't even hear that part of it, Ashley. But yes,
home to the hope that he might have survived because you set him up for that. Oh, it's so offensive. It would be so hurtful.
All right, and that brings us, though, let's go ahead and talk about him. Dreamstat. So first of all, we had figured out from one of the behind the scenes things. We talked about it, I think, in our last episode. We knew we were going to see Lestat in this fashion, where he's basically like, a haunted heart for Louis.
Right. And how could we not? How could we not? What an obvious way to make sure we have him in this season. And Louis is going to carry around guilt like the good Eeyore that he is.
Somebody in the group mentioned in the novel, Louis and Claudia discuss him. And so he's hanging over them in a way,
right?
Through this part of the book. But yeah, it's such a good idea. You kind of wonder how she didn't think about it in the novel. And it's so well played too. In the post credit thing where they do the little behind the scenes look or in episode insight or whatever, Sam calls out here that he's playing this version of Lestat as Louis's projection, right? This is not Lestat in any way. So this is how Louis reads Lestat,
So he says he's mirroring him physically, and he's like he's taking on some of his tones of voice and things like that in what he's doing. It's so
what
brilliant.
Does he do? Basically three things. He tortures him first, right? With the fact that you killed me. And then he admits that he misses Louis. He forgives him outright for the murder. It praises him on it. It was a perfect betrayal, he says, right? And then also,
I'm going to kill you.
He confirms, I'm going to fucking kill you, right? But only when you're happy.
Oh, my God.
Hurry, mon cher, hurry.
That is so See,
perfect.
And this is the shit that is makes this adaptation so brilliant. They get these characters, this is the kind of shit that a guilt-ridden Louis would play in his head, but also there's a version of Lestat that would also feel that and think that,
100%. 100%.
It's so great. I love it.
Honestly, you could imagine if Lestat is literally following him around Europe, part of him would be like, oh, I'll just sneak up and I'll talk to Louis aside. But if he wasn't fairly certain Claudia would burn the village down to get to him again, he might try a play like this, Okay, let's go to our couple our couple of oddballs in the Romanian village. Well, even before that, cool stuff, we get glimpses of the fact that They've been in Europe for a while now. It turns out, I think Lestat says 4 years they've been doing this, basically. And they found a lot of leftovers of vampires, implication that there were vampires here at some time or another, but none of them are here anymore, and it's been a long time since any were. And then we get to our little Romanian village. So we meet Amelia and then Morgan. Now,
loved Amelia. Loved
both of them, honestly.
Loved both of them, honestly. Setup. Yeah, this was a fantastic setup. Also really kind of cool, like telling of the times, like the Nazis are leaving, but they're being replaced by Russians who are also assholes.
Welcome the new boss, same as the old boss.
Exactly. And so it's like, also I just like the little like nods to the historical context that they've set up and that they've chosen purposefully to exist in this time period. So I like that they're not like abandoning that just as like a thing, you know what I mean? Like I like that they're committed to continuing that story and continuing to explain what's going on around our characters, what's happening, what the dangers are beyond, the preternatural world.
So I did not realize exactly how close to the novel this whole scene plays out. I looked it up today in the alphabetary. Morgan and Emily are the name of this couple in the original book.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
and so
shit,
Emily
yes.
is attacked, and she's the villagers are like, we're gonna cut her head off and burn the body and whatever, and Morgan is trying to stop it. So all of that plays out basically the same way. She is not she's not an Eastern European. I think they both are, whatever they are. I think he's British in the novel. Anyway, the big difference is the presence of Dacian.
Yes.
But before we get there, there's a line that I have to call out because it gave me such a chuckle. But then the second time that I watched it, I was like, this is one of those moments, and there's about 3 between Amelia and Morgan that give this relationship depth in a way that makes it matter when things go the way that they go. This episode is not on the same level as the episode of what's the video game adaptation that came out on HBO
Fallout?
last year? The Last of Us.
The Last of Us. Holy shit.
What's the one episode called that everybody talks about? It got the Emmy Awards with Nick Offerman and the guy from White Lotus.
Yes.
I think it's named after the Joni Mitchell song, like
it's
Gonna
so
Love
good.
You for a Long Time or something.
Anyway. Yeah, it was who sang Somewhere Out There? Linda Ronstadt? It was a Linda Ronstadt
Yes, it's
song.
Linda Ronstadt
yeah.
song. Yes.
God, that
Joni
fucking
Mitchell.
episode was so good.
It's an amazing one. Okay, so this episode does not rise to that level, and it's not telling a similar story anyway. But this little vignette of a relationship, of a life with Amelia and Morgan, and it's not like they've been together forever, but they've been together for a while, it feels.
And in shitty circumstances.
In terrible circumstances.
In really
right?
shitty circumstances, yeah.
But they have joy, and they have passion, and they have connection in that
and
same
humor.
way that we saw. Yeah, and humor too,
and
even
humor,
in terrible circumstances.
Yeah.
And so that it mirrored that a little bit for me. And I thought, this is not a filler episode. This is not wasted space.
Oh, no.
Where, honestly, the reason why the movie didn't adapt any of this is because she never visits it in the long run. Like, we don't ever get an answer to what the Revenants are or why they're like this. It's sort of speculated, and then she leaves that and moves on to things that she's more interested in.
Well, and you don't have the time for it. I mean, I totally get that. You don't have the time for it when you're doing a huge adaptation into an hour and maximum probably 45, 50 minutes. You're going to have to cut shit out. And I get that this is something that gets snipped out, but to see it kind of played out like this was so brilliant and fun for me. I just really, like, as horrible as parts of this was and as like kind of heartrending, I wasn't super attached to anything going on. So I was like, holy shit, this is what I was hoping to see on so many levels.
So in the novel, it's just the zombie-like goopy vampire with its skin falling off of it. That's the only thing that exists around here. Yeah. The Daciana character, the mother character, doesn't exist in the novel. What's interesting to me is,
I feel like she's a bit of a callback to like our Mad Queen and in the Vampire Lestat. You know, I feel like that's kind of like our little taste of that. We might not get back that far with that storyline, so here is this version of it.
Well, and there are other characters through the history of these vampires that are saddened and lessened at the end of their lives, right? That are wizened by the years, and yet they've denied themselves the blood for one reason or another, or they've had bad blood for some reason, and they have sort of like withered away as the modern day doesn't make any sense to them anymore.
It's just exhausting,
right?
You know, like it like Highlander, who wants to live forever, you know,
yes,
like eventually.
Yeah. Well, especially without companionship.
Right, which is clearly what she's seeking as she's trying to turn someone, and her blood's not strong enough to do it.
Well, and I mean, what sort of companion was her latest child there
right.
that meets his demise in this one? As Remy, I mean, not Remy, as Louis calls it out. No, I'm a vampire. That's a fucking catfish with teeth.
Right. He's like, that's not what we are. That's fucking gross. That's a mess, is what that is. I like a little bit of ego here, like a little bit of vanity and ego from Louis.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Claudia goes, we're the same. And he goes, we're not the fucking same. We're nothing alike.
I feel like Louis is speaking my inner voice very much this season as he is releasing just a fucking flood of profanity.
Man, okay. So we heard in that behind the scenes little mini-sode that this season was going to be even gorier, I think is what one of the producers mentioned. Oof. They were not kidding. This first episode is goopy.
Yeah, it's real goopy. And we pull out some eyeballs. We poke some throats out, you know, all in a day's work for sexy, slutty vampires.
Our catfish vampire there, I believe, was probably like a leftover dummy from The Walking Dead. They just brought that head over, is my guess. Man,
and bashed the shit out of it. I liked she was like, how was he supposed to find food? Look what you did.
That was honestly, it was one of my favorite interchanges of the whole episode, because she just lays plain what Claudia has done.
Right.
And I think that's the beginning of Claudia's sort of fascination with this woman anyway, which, okay, you called out the old queen. In the trailer, that was my guess. I said, I think we're going to see the old queen. And I guess we sort of did here. Whether or not we ever see that scene played out in this series doesn't mean that it didn't happen, right? So that character can still exist in the history.
Absolutely.
We just might not see it played out. And here we get a moment in another story that they're already telling for several other reasons that not only gives that moment of gravity another place in our series, but also gives a little bit of explanation. They're still not very firm on it, but it gives a little bit of explanation to this entire phenomenon of the Revenants anyway. We finished the episode, and that was one of Kelly's big... She's like, no, this was all very weird. Like, why is any of that? And I'm like, yeah, there's even less explanation in the novels.
Right. You'd be surprised. They actually fleshed this out pretty well for us.
I mean, Louis said it twice. The blood's bad here.
Yeah.
And so they're not being able to make proper vampires.
Yeah, and that's why they themselves don't feel fed and well. That's an interesting thought too. I think I saw a comment from someone that was like, "Well, that feels like complete and utter, like, oh, life's hard, so our blood is shitty." But if you think about the way that like we self-medicate during terrible times, it makes sense that the blood would not be right.
It's weak. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and
if
also
you're not
just
properly
like
fed.
Drunk. Yeah, you're not properly fed. You've been drinking too much. You've been
You're dehydrated?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you like to munch on your lover when they're dehydrated? No, is the answer. No, you don't, actually. So
no one does. No one does.
So no, I think it makes sense. And again, it's not exactly properly supported in the novels, but I think especially in this first novel, we have to remember that Anne's firm plans for the universe were not fully fleshed out at this point.
Right.
And the TV series is being written honestly as a second draft on that. That's the thing that I thought of literally during the previously on. It occurred to me, what if Louis told him the first time, yeah, I owned a plantation and I was born in 1860, whatever. Right, he might. The original version of the novel might have been the story that he told him in the 70s, and now he's really opening it up and telling the truth. I mean, I don't think that's the way that it's been laid out in the series, but anyway, if you ever come across a problem and you're like, well, this isn't the way that it was, this is a second telling.
Yeah,
this is a second telling, and the old stories still exist. So if you like them better, you can always read them anytime you want to.
Absolutely, this is a little bit of a do-over, a redo, if you will. But like, it's still, it just feels so. It feels right. It feels like the world in which these creatures, characters, friends, sweet boys exist.
All right, let's talk about another new character here. What did you think of Real Rashid?
Oh my God.
In particular, Ashley, what did you think of the fact that Daniel will not get off his dick?
Number one, when there was several months back, I noticed that there was a character in the IMDb cast list called Real Rashid. And I made fun of that because I was like, can you imagine, you've been working all your life and you finally get this potentially cool role, and you're the real Rashid. It's just hilarious to me. But I love it. I think it's fucking hilarious. Daniel is not in control of anything, and it's exactly what he says. He's like, I'm up your ass because I can't break them. I can break you. And I think it's part of it is just, it's probably therapeutic for him too, to be able to fucking yell and have a fit about a couple of things that he'd like to have a fit about.
It's one of my favorite lines in the whole episode, and there are a bunch of good ones in this one.
Oh my God.
But he yells at Rashid as he's walking away. That's why I'm coming after you, Real Rashid. You I can fucking break.
You I can fucking break. Real Rashid. Oh, I just love that he's calling him that. That's my fucking favorite thing ever. So,
what do you think the odds are that Rashid is an actual human? I think the odds are basically zero that Rashid is not a vampire. And I think that line specifically is going to be referenced later when it's clear Rashid could have broken him in half at any moment.
But chooses not to.
Yeah. Not okay. I've got the wherewithal and the patience to stand here and let you address me in that manner when I would not be surprised if it turns out Rashid is older than Armand.
I would be really excited if instead of that, Daniel, after he becomes a vampire, turns Rashid into a vampire.
Okay, now that would be also
for no good reason, but just for fun for me.
Okay, so this is a long-term hedge bet play, but just as you said, I called some things about this first episode a long time ago. So
Joel, you really did. You really did. Here.
There's a character in the later novels called Rashamondes, and I would not be astounded if Rashid is actually Rashamondes in disguise. Now, standing there as a servant would be out of character for what we know from the novel for Mr. Rashamondes, but there you go. I'm placing the name is a little. I mean, and I wondered honestly about it when Rashid showed up in season 1, and I was like, oh, I wonder if it might be this other. There is a Rashid character in the books, but it's not. I don't believe this is going to be the Rashid character from the books. We'll see, maybe. Anyway, there's my long-term hedge play. I love that interplay. I think you're right. I think it's Daniel's outlet. Now that he knows who Armand is and that they've got a past, but he still doesn't. I still don't think he knows exactly what the past is. And
these
Armand
guys
calls that out himself later in the episode too.
Yes, he does. And these guys are so intense. I love the interview going along, and what does he say every time Armand speaks because he's
disregard.
Not on the record? Disregard. Yes, disregard. Disregard.
That again is the voice of the vampire Armand, but
who is not on the record, but disregard that asshole.
Not on the record. Yeah. And then Armand turns it on him. Yeah, no, that's great. Also, I
loved it.
Let me call this out here. I love that Armand is a big iPad boy.
Yes, he is.
I am an iPad user, and he's got the big one too. I love it. It's got to be an iPad. He's a bad guy, or at least ostensibly can be a bad guy. So my guess is that Apple didn't give them one to actually use, but what else is he using that's that large and has a pencil on the top of it? That's
right.
an iPad.
No, that's definitely
Anyway,
he's
my
an
new
Apple.
one's going to be here on Wednesday, so mwah, love you, Armand.
He's an Apple boy for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Claudia is really good with kids, isn't she, Ashley?
Absolutely not. Claudia.
When she throws that little boy down?
Jesus Christ, Claudia. You can't even try. This is one point where I was like, oh, well, she's not at all childlike. But I think that was the point of that scene, is that she's like, I can't connect with fucking kids. I'm a grown-ass woman and I need to get on with my business.
Well, I think it was the juxtaposition. Louis is sitting in the bar giving his real name out and swapping stories and laughing with this couple, and Claudia is like, fuck it, we're here to look for vampires, and they're not in there drinking vodka.
Kind of happy for Louis. Like, he is like, this is the first good night I've had in a really long time, and I felt that, like, I think that anybody who's been in like a big funk or bout of depression, like, you might have a night one time that's just exceptional, and you're like, oh, my soul needed that to kind of reload and refill a little bit.
Can we call out though? Okay, so Morgan comes over and introduces himself. They have their first little interchange, and then he asks Louis, heard you have some vodka? And they start having a drink. And the salute is, Morgan says, up your bum, and then takes a shot. And Louis goes, well, okay, then. And then he takes his shot. But then was it just me, or did you see Louis give him the eye? Like, would I let him? Maybe.
I mean, maybe. I like that I learned what boofing was from a potential Supreme Court justice. So, you can put anything up your butt, drugs or alcohol.
Up your bum. There you go. I didn't even think about it being a boof play.
No, I'm sure it was not. But I mean, that's now because of, the world we live in. That's what I think of.
As we found out later, Morgan wouldn't have wanted any part of Louis in that way anyway, because he thought he was a dirty red.
He did. So, he thought he was a communist.
I love
or a deserter.
If you're a deserter, turn around and take your punishment. I was like, damn, okay, brother, all right.
Yeah,
it's the end of the war. Like,
Morgan's not quite as friendly as one would expect. And I guess maybe it's because of being in that environment, being where they were during the war. Maybe he has little tolerance for either, of what he thinks Louis might be. But it's also interesting too, like, everyone's like not used to seeing black people, which is hilarious.
Or good-looking people, apparently, to hear Amelia say it. They're not used to a man with such good looks.
Yes, with good looks, exactly. So, I mean, let's not act like we're super progressive, Morgan.
All right, there's two things here. First of all, Claudia's a terrible liar. She comes in and she goes, "Daddy, I fell out a tree."
Oh my God. And then he has to unbreak her arm.
Okay, but that's my next point. Okay, we're in a Romanian village where we know people have hung garlic up all over the place. They're carrying crucifixes,
shooting
They've got garlic strung around their neck, shooting caskets. And yet, when this couple of new outsiders wander away so that he can tend to his daughter's medical needs, and then don't come back for the rest of the day, and then suddenly reappear the next night.
No one's
where
concerned.
Did they go? Nobody's concerned about that. Nobody goes, hey, maybe those are vampires. They were gone all day.
Maybe these are not good people. Maybe these guys drink the blood. We do not know.
Anybody see them eat anything?
Did you look at their papers? Did they say Kiev? I'm not sure about that, is all I'm saying.
I thought when he's peeling up the metal framework to climb down into the whatever that piece of machinery that was, I'm like, they're all in the next room, right? Like, I mean, they got to be close because we heard the argument
subtle.
later. Yeah, what are you doing? Anyway, Claudia's got a great line in this argument with Louis too, where they're talking about, well, it's right after that. They first see the revenant vampire, and then Louis like, that ain't for us. Like, let's leave it alone. Claudia goes, if you can't take your ballroom dancing, to hell with him. Question mark,
That was hilarious.
I thought that was perfect. First of all, it is interesting to see that in the novels, Louis is also very interested in the origin of the species, so to speak,
right,
and the purpose of vampiric life. In season 1, we get that a little bit. In
not
this
as
season,
much as we want, as
No.
much as I wanted, and that's something I've said. You know, I feel like our Louis isn't as curious as he's supposed to be.
Well, and as we talked about in the Q&A episode, if they're going to center him more in some of the stories moving forward, a curiosity in that historical aspect of vampirism would be beneficial for that,
Right.
for that, you know? So it's interesting here that they're still playing it as he's kind of done with all of this. And what are we going to
Right.
find anyway? What are we looking for? Adam and Eve? We're looking for God,
Oh,
Claudia?
yeah.
Which is funny because in the later books, hint, hint, yes, they look for Adam and Eve and God, everybody. they do it. And then they run Adam and Eve back in a different way. I'll tell you that story a long time from now. Anyway, yeah, man, it's interesting that he is... What is he looking for, honestly, at this point, other than a happy Claudia?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's rudderless, and I think that's part of the problem. And part of why he ends up under Armand's spell is just that he's rudderless. He's trying to keep her happy, and outside of that, this version of Louis, I don't know that he has any sort of direction or hope or anything.
Okay, so they fight the revenant vampire. She pulls the eyeballs out,
Right.
and then Mama Vampire kills him, and then sadly walks off back to the house.
They
Louis
follow
and
her.
Claudia follow her. Okay, Amy on the Facebook group asked a great question here. After their exchange, and they talk for a few minutes, it's a great scene.
It is really good. It's such a nice little like peek into that sort of like ancient lost vampire soul that we haven't gotten to see yet. And I think it's great to see it at this point because it gives you greater understanding of that longing. And when we meet Armand, the fact that Armand, that's part of what he wants, and you know, and a partner, a companion, when we meet Armand in the past. So yeah, it's setting us up very well.
We get some Anne Rice nomenclature there too. Daciana, the older vampire here, mentions the Devil's Road.
Devil's Road.
Yeah, I love that one. That's one of my favorites, honestly.
Mine too. I love it. It's such a beautiful
turn of phrase. Yeah. Anyway,
what a genius she was.
Amy's question is, after Claudia gives her a little bit of blood, she gives one little dab of blood, and she has a taste of this fresh young blood. They begin to opine with each other, and Daciana says, "Oh, I'll follow you across the ocean, and I'll grow strong again, and we'll feel the wind in our hair, and we'll wait for my children, and you know, et cetera, et cetera." And then she says, in response to what she said earlier to them, "We own the night, yes." Now she says, "We own nothing," and she leaps into the fire. And so Amy's question is, why does she do that after she tells Claudia that she's going to go with her? Now the performance is very subtle. It's not openly sarcastic, but I read her walking Claudia through all the things that she was going to do as a sorrowful, bittersweet sarcasm. Oh yes, absolutely. I'll cross the ocean with you.
I can do.
Oh yeah, of course. I'll do that. Yeah. Ha.
I can do all those things, and nothing will change, and it won't matter at all.
In 1,000 years, I'll still be just as alone and just as sad, and in some place that I don't understand. Yes, that's how I heard it.
Absolutely.
You know, both my grandmothers, God bless them, the last several years that they lived, they would constantly harp, "I wish the Lord would just take me on." I know you've had old people in your life that said some version of that, right? Oh,
right.
I wish the Lord would just call me home, or whatever. You know, I'm so old and tired and confused, I don't want to live anymore. Well, first of all, as soon as you start saying that, you make it true. But also, there is a point where our faculties fail us in a way that leaves us in a position in life where we no longer feel we are in control of our body and lives on a day-to-day
Or we're no
basis.
longer ourselves. We're no longer a real
If you
version
lose your mind,
of who we are.
Yeah, you lose your capacity. Now, I feel like, the positive in me, the whatever, the optimist, I say, if you just looked for things, and if she thought about how good that blood tasted, you got some more of that?
Right.
Hell yeah, hook me up to the pipe.
Both of y'all can give me a tasty, and we'll all be better for it.
And they were talking about having to cross the ocean. I just kept thinking, there's better blood in Paris, I bet. Paris hasn't been blown all to bits for the last 150 years. And I mean, again, the idea of like ancestral sorrow in a place souring the blood, I don't know. That gets like maybe a little bit eugenics-y sounding to me almost, but...
Well, I think it's more about the scourge of like colonialism and like shit like that. It's like
literally the resource has been sapped out and excavated elsewhere.
Absolutely. Think about like what was done to Native Americans here in the United States, and you just think about the deep sorrow. That's a deep sorrow.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. And so she jumps on the fire. Now, somebody else in the group earlier today mentioned the fact that this is going to undercut, whatever we see happen with Magnus.
I don't think
thinking again is we might not ever actually see Magnus jump on the fire. We've heard Lestat talk about it. And in this moment, somebody else mentioned, it's Claudia getting a glimpse into that moment for Lestat. Now, this is different. That's not her maker. But like Claudia had hope for an elder vampire that could lead her into this life in a way that could be sustainable. That's what I get from Claudia. Is like,
furthermore,
she's looking
a woman.
Well, yes.
A woman who's safe. Like, she feels safe with her. That woman is like a mother. That is a mother looking for a child as well. She refers to...
I didn't even think about that, but of course you're right.
Yeah.
She sings a lullaby.
Yeah, and so it is totally kind of woven into that daughter mother woman child kind of thing, and Claudia looking for someone who can guide her and is going to protect her and be safe. These other vampires she has known have all been men.
Yeah.
These other vampires that have been assholes have all been men, and the idea of a woman who's older than her that could take her under her wing, that she could help her become stronger, like for a split second. Claudia has a vision of what could be. This is, I think somebody said that they felt sympathetic to Claudia after this episode in a way that they hadn't before. And I think that that's a lot of it. I think that piece of it right there is a big reason why you start to empathize with her even more. Like, I love Claudia. I've always been a Claudia stan, but just because these fucking grown-ass men are jerking her around and killing babies and making them vampires. Jesus Christ.
I didn't make a note about it, so I almost forgot to bring it up, but that you reminded me just then, talking about all these motherfuckers. She says that to him, you and him and Antonia or whatever, what was her name? Antoinette, and the motherfucker. All of them terrible. All of them bastards. All of them.
Yeah, and Antoinette is just a symptom of Lestat for her. Yeah, it's just she's a pawn of Lestat. She's not, and she's younger than Claudia. This isn't someone that can help me, guide me, help me grow, learn. Like, it is. I think that they really, really kind of hit on that missing a mother figure, missing a protective figure. Even your brother might abandon you for a hot piece of ass, which Claudia has already learned.
Literally, she screams it at him in the trailer, like, you picked another one over me. All right, but no, there's an exchange, or after that exchange between the two of them, though, there's the moment where Louis realizes that Claudia had lied to him and that she did dream.
Yes.
So, okay, there's two moments in this episode where we get this, let's backtrack and rehash. Early in the episode, Amelia tells them, what everybody's worried about.
Yes.
And she hints at the problems of the village, including maybe a vampire. She doesn't say that word, but hints at it. And then he goes, wait, no, it didn't happen like that. It happened later, after Claudia left the table.
She wouldn't say it in front of Claudia.
Right.
Because she thought Claudia was a child.
And then here, he had said earlier in the episode, Claudia says that she never dreamed. And so she's writing that in the diary. And he says, I can confirm that. She told me that herself. And he even admits out loud to Daniel, I mean, she could have just been telling me that, but she wrote it, so let's believe it.
Right.
Okay. But then later he realizes, no, she was dreaming beside me. She was having a nightmare there beside me in the factory. Okay. So what do we think? Is this literally just that the end of season 1, the revelations with Daniel, and the beginning of this tale has, as Louis calls out in this episode, begun to open up these memories for him? Is that all that we're supposed to take away from that? Or do you think there's more to any of that?
Well, you're seeing the veil slip, I think. Whatever veil's been put up to either to make Louis want to tell this story to make Lestat look bad, or whether or not this is the version that Armand has made Louis believe is real. There are times when the veil slips and the fiction is kind of like in flux, and you can sort of see the lie underneath things. And I think that we're getting kind of clues of that as we're going along. And I think that those are definitely moments of those where it's like, here's a hint that shit is twisted and weird. And the way that Armand reacts is, you can tell, like, he's so uncomfortable with the idea of they're in bed towards the latter, like, third of the 2/3 of the episode, and they're in bed together, and Louis asks for the pages that have been pulled out of Claudia's diaries to be restored because he doesn't trust his own memories, and Armand's excuse is, well, I'm in those. So
which made me wonder, by the way, I just confused me. I thought the only pages that had been removed were the pages about Killer and her assault.
He wasn't there yet. We didn't know Armand yet. And so there have to be other pages removed that have not been revealed yet.
Well, Ashley, as we read in the Vampire Armand novel, which we discussed in a recent episode, there are specifically a few stories from the period of Interview with the Vampire that were not included in that original novel. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, quite so. And also not included in the follow-up novel, which tells Lestat's side of things. Maybe that waited until we heard Armand's side of things.
Because neither one of those sons of bitches knew it happened. I am just convinced now that we're going to get that moment from the end of the Vampire Armand novel where he discusses this and his relationship with Claudia.
Well, it's clear right now that Armand and Louis have not had, I don't feel like they've had their separation.
No, not at all. They've made it clear
like they've been together for 70 years. So
done everything together.
These fellas have not had their separation yet that they actually have after Claudia's death in that version of things. It's such
fast. I'm just so excited that there's so much for us to unfold. So that scene, though, is opened with a really interesting moment that I want to call out here.
Okay. Yes.
Bidding.
Yes.
So Armand is speaking to an off-screen Louis, and he says, we've got a very interesting bid on the Bacon triptych. So there's 3 Bacon photos. We've discussed them from season 1, I believe. Erica Roberto Pala had a whole long series about those photos.
So fantastic.
The paintings and their history. But Armand calls out, it's a new name, so he's going to have to do his due diligence, but it's a number you wouldn't anticipate.
Right.
Okay. The way that all of that's laid out, it's too much. That's going to come back.
It's got to be Marius. Do you think it's Marius?
It's either Marius or Lestat.
Or Lestat. Yeah,
100%.
Marius or Lestat. 100%. I totally agree.
So if it's Marius, and if what we think is true about the next thing that also happens in that scene, which as they finally quiet down, the groan happens again. The groan in the building. Somebody called out in the Facebook group, you guys keep mentioning the groan. What is it? So Armand references in season 1 that the building is so tall and it has to move in the wind, obviously, a little bit. And there is a noise that originates from that. And that's what we're hearing. You hear it several times in season 1. You hear it very clearly in this scene with the two of them in bed.
Because tall buildings have to be designed to handle, like, that's legit. That's a legitimate thing.
What
and
they
have to
don't
be designed
do, though, I'm pretty sure, is make
groan and moan.
I don't think they make a groan and noise. No, brand new buildings in Dubai, I don't believe they make a noise like that in the penthouse.
You wouldn't hear it anyway. Like, they would have it soundproof within an inch of its life,
right? Yeah. Okay. So if what we think the groan is what we think it is, and Marius is not in this building. What the fuck, Ashley?
Yeah, did Armand just like fucking
did he
run off with them? Yeah, like what?
Did they run off again? Did they leave? What did I say in the Q&A episode? What if it's Louis that they want?
That's bananas.
I know, but what if it's Louis that they want and he's been mind wiped so he doesn't remember that they're there? What if the whole reason why Louis's memory needs to be hazy is because he doesn't know what's downstairs?
Well, that part makes sense. If the whole, like, that he doesn't know that they're there. I completely buy that. I completely buy the idea that Louis has no idea that if those old fuckers are under the floors, there's no way he knows.
So, okay, and there's one more. Oh, okay. So after that, they decide, Armand decides, I should say, because he tells Louis, we're going to do this together. First of all, the language there is interesting, too. Armand says,
yes,
the boy that we knew, the boy who barely fumbled his tape recorder and didn't understand the story he was being told, et cetera, he's still there. And we can have him saying what happened next right away, as long as we do it together. And so they're going to go and begin the interview together at this point. But the way that he said that, saying what happens next, or saying what happened next.
That they can manipulate him into saying what they want him to say.
Yeah. So this makes me think, like, is there something about the past that they need to unlock? And that Daniel's the key to it, right? Something we did in the 70s that for some reason I can't remember. I don't know. This has sent me off into all sorts of places.
There's another weird line. There's another weird line in there that really hits me strangely, and it's that Armand says to Louis that he wants to break you down so he can put you back together the way he wants, basically. And I just, for the life of me, cannot figure out what would be Daniel's motive for that. That is, to me, a clear, open manipulation of Louis and his opinion and view on Daniel. Because to me, Daniel's motives don't involve that at all. He's just trying to figure out what the fuck, you know? Like, he's not trying to, like, break Louis down and then fucking manipulate him. Like, that's what Armand's doing.
Yeah,
we
think. Okay, I hate to reference him as often as I do, but that fucking guy, our former president, like, everything that he says about his opponents, you can bet it's because he's done it recently, and that's the reason he's saying somebody else did it. Like,
100%.
It's always what was the Paul Rubens thing? It's not me, but you know, whatever you are. What was the thing?
I'm rubber, you're glue.
Yes, I'm rubber, you're glue. It bounces off of me and sticks to you. Like, that's literally what you can say on anything that he says. And I think here exactly, you're right. This is what Armand has done to Louis already. And he's terrified that somebody might realize it, I think, is really what's going on there.
Right, right. Because everything's coming to a head with this situation. And Louis, of course, didn't see it coming because he didn't fucking know what Armand's done to his memories. So Louis thought this would be, oh my God, he's so great.
He's so wonderful. Because first of all, I love the fact that they're holding hands in front of Daniel, but they barely peck when they're alone on the bed. And Armand clearly expected more, by the way. Like, he gets to peck and he follows
leaning
Louis
in
back with his eyes, and he's like, "Oh, that was all that was, huh? Okay, then." Which is interesting because, again, here, this was the same argument effectively that Lestat and Louis had, right? It was like, I want to be fucking more, actually. Is that a problem for you? But
actually, I'm too sad, says
right?
the Eeyore vampires.
They march into the living room together to continue the interview, so fucking proud of themselves. And Armand in particular, like, has a nice outfit on, and he's like, crosses his legs on the couch, and he's like, "Let me tell you, I was born in Eastern Europe," and
he's like
already,
"Shut up."
And yeah, fucking Daniel just goes,
"Shut
we'll
up,
get to you."
Not your turn
and
yet,
goes
buddy.
right back to the interview, and I'm like, fucking yes.
I'm here for that power move. I am here for that power move from Daniel. I want Daniel to fucking take some control back. Like, as much as Armand said to Louis, "You lost control of the interview." That is not the fuck true, because they are mind fucking our boy Daniel all along the way.
Well, it is interesting to me. I mean, we speculated at the end of season 1 and in our rewatch and everything, what is the moment right after the end of season 1? Well, it's clear to me that Daniel has not let them know that he remembers them yet, right? They didn't have a whole conversation about how, "Oh, I know you're a vampire. I remember you were there in the 70s. They haven't gotten into that yet. And I don't
you're
believe
totally
that he said it out loud. Yeah,
I don't think he has
had
either.
that memory.
Holy shit.
He woke up and had that memory. He hasn't shared that with the boys.
And has kept it to himself.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
He's more skeptical of Armand than ever, and more convinced that this is like a power play from Armand. But he's still feeling it out and trying to, put his own puzzle pieces together. And he doesn't know what the play is yet, I think, as far as revealing that knowledge.
Can I say how much I love the fact that you and I both watch this show like eagle-eyed and insanely, and inevitably,
it's so much fun.
It is. It's amazing. But inevitably, when we talk about it, there are things that each of us catch that the other doesn't, and I fucking love that so much. It's so fantastic because, like, now my brain is like, holy shit! No, he hasn't told them he knows about the past yet. Holy shit. And I hadn't even thought about that. Like, that hadn't even registered in my brain yet.
Well, it's just like I hadn't considered, the mother figure nature of Daciana's appeal for Claudia. But yeah, obviously. I mean, they really lay that one on thick. She sings a lullaby twice, No,
but I love that. I love that we look at it. We look at it the same, but super, like, obviously everything's through our lens and our, like, experiences, and I love that. And I love that we get that too from, like, our group, our people that watch it and talk about it and want to engage with it. Like, everybody has different experiences. Not everybody's in love with it like we are. Not everybody's like 100% on board yet. Other people are completely obsessed just like we are. Some people are more obsessed than we are, and I am #blessed because of it, And so it's just, it's so much fun to have these conversations.
It is. Thank you, Rollin and creative team. I mean, honestly, which, by the way, that's the one big downside I'll say. The insider piece didn't feature Rollin Jones at all, and I was bummed. I'm like, where are you hiding him? Where are you hiding him?
Bring him out.
He's like my third favorite guy involved in this series after Sam and Jacob. So bring him out, please. I say that. Assad's probably going to win me over in the next couple of episodes.
He's fantastic. He's so really fantastic. He's great in the role. I think we can all agree that's not the way Armand looks in the books, but aside from that, like, this guy's really got a handle on that role, and I love us. The love-hate relationship we all have with Armand is always so much fun to unpack and discuss, because, I mean, he is a murder goblin who we can't help but have some sympathy for.
Well, and my guess is we're probably going to get some narration from him even starting next week.
We must. It must be coming.
Yeah, I think Daniel's finally going to let him speak for a minute or two.
He has to know. He has to know. He won't be able to help himself.
I love the tease there, though. Members of my coven had sensed, and then they shut him up. And I'm like, what did they sense, Armand? How far away did they sense? Why didn't you sense it? Or did you sense it and you just don't want to admit it? You sly dog, you.
You little bastard, you murder goblin.
damn good show. Great start for season 2.
Absolutely.
Interesting question somebody asked in the group, by the way, because AMC is promoting this in a lot of places as episode 8. I think we knew they were going to do this. The end of season 1 said Interview with the Vampire Part 1 at the end of the final credits or whatever. So they're considering this Part 2 for the one story. It does make me wonder now if there won't be a subtitle or a title change in some way when we get into other books after this.
I feel like that might be the way.
Over.
Yeah, I feel like that might be the direction we're going in since well, number one, they just have the rights to everything, so they can literally
use all of those titles. I mean, Interview with the Vampire is a big seller, but it's not actually the biggest seller. I know this is hard to believe because it's the one they made a movie with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, but like Interview with the Vampire is not the biggest seller in the series. I'm fairly certain Queen of the Damned is still the biggest seller.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's
like by a big margin.
By quite a bit. Well, because everything, like that was the 90s was such a time for like to be super into vampires and creepy shit, and it was just fantastic. It was such a resurgence of that sort of thing, and her book sales reflect that 100%.
Well, and Queen of the Damned, as sprawling as it is, because it also tells the history of vampirism basically, but even with that, it's a fairly straightforward adventure, right? Like there is a narrative and it all comes together at the end of one book. Whereas like Interview with the Vampire and even the Vampire Lestat to some degree are like these existential treatises on the nature of good and evil and like what is our purpose and where is our place in the universe and what is like death and all of those themes are in the other books too. But 100%. Tale of the Body Thief especially are like
just fun.
You could take out the vampire in the middle of them and put Indiana Jones or James Bond in them, and it would still play pretty good.
Yes, 100%. I totally agree. Especially Tale of the Body Thief, but yeah, exactly. They find like a sense of like adventure and just embracing the horror of it too. I mean, like we can't pretend like this isn't a horror genre because despite how beautiful and everything Anne creates is so magical, it's still like, I mean, it's fucking vampires.
It's fucking vampires indeed. And sometimes the vampires are fucking too. That's what you could get right here, folks.
That's what you get here with us and interview with a vampire. Aren't you lucky?
Oh. All right, so until next week, you got to go watch season 2, episode 2 of Interview with the Vampire on AMC and AMC Plus
immediately.
So they did end up, a little programming note, they did end up airing the shows earlier on AMC. Shows up on AMC Plus, I think at midnight East Coast time, Saturday night, Sunday morning. So we were able to watch this the first time, at least Sunday during the day. And next week we will endeavor to try to get our recording in on Sunday nights too, if possible.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
We really want to watch it twice before we get to talk about it. So,
also, it was Mother's Day, and Joel's
very good point.
Beautiful wife, Kelly, is an amazing mother who should be appreciated and celebrated. So, of course, we were not recording on her Mother's Day.
We watched Enola Holmes, the Millie Bobby Brown Netflix movie.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's what we did for Mother's Day. We watched Pollyanna on Disney Plus on Saturday, and then we watched Enola Holmes on Sunday.
She is the sweetest and purest of soul and heart. Oh my God.
Pollyanna
I love it.
was my idea, actually, although all the family loved it. Kelly,
you are the sweetest and purest of soul and heart.
I barely remembered it. I just remembered that I liked it, and I've always been a fan of Haley Mills. And honestly, it was fitting, I think, that we watched a Haley Mills movie and then we turned around and watched a Millie Bobby Brown movie because, there.
Oh yeah,
there is something, and of course we've talked about Kirsten Dunst recently. There is something really, really special about having a truly talented and charismatic child actor, and those are 3 great examples. Millie Bobby Brown has been off the charts since she was little.
Oh my
Haley
God.
Mills was a generational star,
absolute boss
for Disney, and And we blew our kids' minds explaining to them that was also the teacher for the first couple of seasons
of Saved by the Bell.
Yeah. They were like, who? I was like, yeah, that's Miss Bliss, man.
Miss Bliss.
All grown up. God, I had such a crush on Haley Mills.
You know, her sister was on the amazing soap opera Passions.
No way.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
Okay, now I've got to go look that up because I watched Passions when it was on. Back in the
Passions
day,
was
I
a
didn't
fucking
realize
hoot.
Haley Mills' sister was on it.
Haley Mills' sister. I wish I could remember her name out of pocket right now, but I cannot. But
all right,
Google will serve you well.
There you go. You go Google that. I'm going to do the same, and we'll discuss Haley Mills' sister and much more. Mostly vampire related next week.
Juliet
You're
Mills.
on Juliet Mills. There you go. All right. We'll be back. Until next time, we've been your hosts. I'm Joel.
I'm Ashley.
And we are the Articulate Coven. Thanks for listening to The Articulate Coven. You can join our community on Facebook by following the links in the show notes or searching for Articulate Coven on Facebook. You can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or at articulatecoven.com. And share us with your Anne Rice-loving friends.